Hi everyone, I'm James Milan. Welcome to this episode of Talk of the Town. I think this is going to be a fun one. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I have here with me Arlington native Stephen Radichia, who we're going to talk about Eephus, which is a movie that you could see if you were looking here in March or April now of 2025. You'd be able to see in the theaters right now. Eephus is a movie that was premiered in Cannes and has been reviewed in some pretty major and hefty places here in the U.S. and all positive. And Stephen has joined us to talk about, actually want to talk about his life for a little bit as an actor and also just the specific experience of that film. So, long introduction, but really glad that you're here.
Hey, thanks for having me, James. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. And you know, you reached out to us about this just to let us know that Eephus existed, and we jumped right on it because it really is kind of fun to just think about somebody born and raised right here, who is now involved in something that has you on the stage at Cannes being introduced in a French accent, from what I understand.
Yes.
Is that right? But let's start. You know, we will get to talking about the movie in quite a bit, but let's just start with. I said that you're an Arlington native, so tell us a little bit about, you know, again, born here, growing up here, et cetera, and also how you started. How you got the acting bug in there somewhere.
Yeah, so I grew up right up the street from Bishop School. My parents actually still live in the house I grew up in. Both of my parents actually grew up in Arlington too.
Those are some deep roots, man.
Yeah, my mother went to the Locke School. My father went to Cutter. They both went to Audison. They went to Arlington High.
You know, most of our audience isn't even going to know what you're talking about, but those who do are going to be like, "Whoa, right. That's a tour of Arlington right there."
Yeah, there were some other elementary schools back in the day. Even my mother's mother, who I never met because she died when my mother was young, went to Arlington High School. So definitely a lot of like roots in this town. But yeah, as I went to Bishop School, I went to Gibbs Junior High School back when Gibbs was still a junior high.
In the same place you were telling me, which I didn't even know about.
Same location. We were actually, my class was actually the last class to go to Gibbs for 2 years. And then it changed over. I forget if it changed over to Leslie Ellis at that time or,
But I guess you're talking about a time in which there was both an Audison and a Gibbs, and there were students like from the same grades in both of those schools.
Right. It was kind of wild looking at it now. Is when I got to high school, there was like half a town that I didn't know. Like nowadays, all the elementary schools start in sixth grade.
And they funnel everybody to Gibbs and then to Audison, so that everybody is spending that time there and then moving on to high school.
But yeah, back then it was like starting freshman year of high school. It's like, who are all these kids?
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of wild, and I kind of remember the ones that I became friends with right away. And it was actually, I think, in my drama class that I started taking. But yeah, so. I eventually, I went to college I went to Providence College in Rhode Island, and I've spent some other years in other New York City and Watertown, and but I've been, the majority of my life I've spent in Arlington, probably like 75-80% of it. So, and our son goes to school here, and my wife went to Arlington High School too. And
so I guess you're a pretty legit guest for us to have on Talk of the Town here in Arlington.
I was not born here. I was born in Cambridge, but
my God, we forgot about it. We didn't know that, folks.
Right.
Before.
So I got a full disclosure that But
no, but that's really cool, and I do want to. I'm curious. Just did you start acting? And I know that the audience will share with the audience that I know it's not. You don't make your living as an actor, but it's something that you've been doing very consistently for a long time. When did that start, and what's the origin story here of the acting?
I think I need to dig up my 6th grade yearbook at Bishop because I'm fairly certain my goal was to be a famous actor. It was on my mind then. I hadn't done any plays or anything like that, but I'm sure films like Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark were probably like inspirational to me because they were entertaining and exciting and just like this whole different world. But yeah, I remember like being 9 or 10 and like wanting to be an actor, even though I didn't really know what that entailed. But it was, yeah, when I got to Gibbs, I think I did one of their musicals. It was Little Abner, and so that was like the first time I was ever on stage before. And Little Abner was a musical, and I'm not really blessed with the singing abilities, so it was usually just the non-singing parts. But and that's kind of where it started. I guess I was at Gibbs, but for some reason in 8th grade I did not audition for the musical. I'm not sure why, but my interest was still there. I just didn't audition for it.
In AHS, you did spend time.
Yeah,
in the
Arlington
drama?
High right away. My older sister also went to Arlington High, as well as one of my brothers, and my older sister was involved in like drama, and I think it was called Story Theater at the time, and so I think that was also in my mind. So I knew I wanted to take drama class as my art elective, and I ended up taking drama for all 4 years with Mr. Roberts, the drama teacher. I did not audition for Grease, which was my freshman year of high school, because I was trying out for the baseball team. So I didn't audition for Grease, which I regret because I can tell the story later. But I got cut from the freshman baseball team. but and then I ended up doing like the musicals. It was The Boyfriend, it was Mame, and it was Godspell.
Wow, you remember?
Yeah.
Boom, no problem.
I think
huh?
I might even remember some of my lines from some of them.
Wow.
But the parts I typically had were smaller parts because, again, I'm not a singer, and so.
And the musicals were really the option for a drama performance in high school.
Correct.
I think, right?
At the time, I don't think I can't recall, but I don't think they really had any fall productions. And I was playing football too, so even if they did anything during the fall, I wouldn't have been able to do it. But it was pretty much the musicals in the spring.
Well, it's really interesting just to hear, even from the earliest days, that there was this kind of tension between your athletic ambitions or interests and your dramatic, interests, and sometimes one trumped the other, et cetera. How nice that you would combine those, in what we're here to mostly talk about today. But let's stick with high school and then college. So by the time you were saying that when you were, 9 or 10, it was definitely in your mind, oh, it'd be great to be an actor. I'm sure you're the only 9 or 10-year-old who thought that, right? No, but I mean, it is one of the reasons I was really interested to and excited about talking to you today about this is that I do think that is the kind of ambition or dream that is shared by a lot of people when they are young at some point. Yeah. And you know how it feels to actually, spend a good amount of your time making room for acting in your life. So I think just the fact that you can speak to that as somebody who's actually done it is something that I'm looking forward to sharing with the audience. So I'm just wondering, at the time that you graduate from Arlington High School, having done these different productions, et cetera, was that urge that you'd had it as 9 and 10-year-old, was that even stronger at that point? Had it been replaced by something else? Where were you at as you headed off to Providence?
No, it was just as strong. And I can be like completely honest, like I was not a star actor in like my high school drama department. I was not a star on stage. I genuinely loved it and I was interested in it and I was happy to have the experience like in those musicals and taking the drama classes. But yeah, it was still, when I was like looking for colleges, like a theater major was always on my mind and I was always scoping out the theaters when I would visit schools. And I remember peeking in at the when I visited Providence College my senior year of high school. I think I peeked in the theater and they were rehearsing Wizard of Oz, and I was like, it seemed like all this excitement and their energy came out of that door when I just peeked in to watch them rehearse.
So that was very serendipitous, right? That like just would have stoked you pretty good to
Right.
see that at that moment.
Right. And it was, and I was fortunate because Providence College was actually my first choice. And the fact that I got in was awesome. But it had a good, a really solid theater department. And I think what was great for me was it wasn't so large that I would get lost, and just I had opportunities right off the bat. I got a non-speaking part in the Euripides play, The Trojan Women, and I was so excited because I didn't have to speak, but I got to be on stage, and it wasn't a musical. It was this
Right.
heavy Greek drama, and
The real deal, so to speak.
right, yeah, and so pretty much right from the start, I don't think I declared a theater major my freshman year, but I started taking like script analysis class and history of theater type classes. So that was my freshman year. I only did that one play, and then I did crew on some other plays. But it was never really another like major that I maybe in hindsight I probably should have maybe doubled in computer science or something.
Something more.
Something
yes.
very,
Of course, something that your parents would have said,
marketable.
"Oh yeah, okay, you can make a living at that."
Right.
But obviously you've done fine, and I am wondering whether has there been any time in your adult life, so to speak, from the point at which you graduated college, have to start making a living, etc. Did you have a go at doing being an actor as your profession? Or have you always had to try and make your living doing something else and then get as much acting in as you can?
Yeah, so throughout my 20s, I worked, I had my day job, and I would do a lot of theater. I also had long hair in my 20s, so I did a lot of Shakespeare, which was a lot of fun. And so I can kind of put an asterisk on, I technically was a working actor in New York City. I moved to New York City in my late 20s. I was taking some classes at the Lee Strasberg Institute, and I got this newspaper. It's called Backstage, and that's where a lot of actors find out about their auditions. And I see this one post. It was looking for actors for Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. It was for
actors who had to keep very still.
Well, in this case, it was they have a interactive haunted attraction, a haunted house, and they were looking for actors for. It was this movie called Van Helsing. It was a Hugh Jackman film.
I remember that. Yep.
And so they had the licensing rights to make their own haunted house, and I was like, yeah. I didn't have a job when I moved to New York, which I'm kind of proud of myself because I'm not one of those people that just doesn't like having some security, but I had some money saved up. But I was like, oh, this looks like this could be fun. So I auditioned for it, and I ended up. I think I had a call back, and I ended up getting the job. So I like to sometimes tell people that my first audition in New York led to, it was
to time it mattered. Right.
That it was a paid job for the next 3.5 years, on my first audition. But it was a lot of fun.
You don't go into the details after that.
Right. I can kind of leave it vague. Yeah, it was off Broadway, Times Square.
Way off Broadway. But you would have heard of the place.
Right.
You would know the venue if I told you.
I performed 5-6 days a week. There you go. It was a lot of fun, and I have a couple good friends all these years later that I met there. But it was a lot of fun, and you had to kind of be creative, and so that was kind of how I can technically say, I was a fully working actor for
well done,
3.5 years.
Okay, so I just want to kind of zoom forward because as interested as I am, we also want to talk, of course, about your film. So let's go ahead and zoom ahead. You've been acting over, for all these years since.
Consistently.
Yep. And I know you worked a lot with Emerson College projects, and is that so? Basically, Boston area.
Yeah, primarily
acting possibility.
I used to do theater up until about 10 years ago, but just having a 9-year-old son and just not really quite having the time for it. we'll do a lot of short films or student films because I can squeeze those in on the weekends. But I've done a lot of Emerson College, Boston University, and actually one Emerson College student film I did actually was my first film at Cannes. That was like 7 years ago.
right?
So technically, I'm on number 2.
Wow.
They have a short film part of the festival, and this Emerson College thesis film I did, which I was like the second lead in it. Was an official.
Right, great.
Yeah.
So you got to Cannes this time, and
I
they're
got
like,
to
"Oh,
yeah.
Stefan,
Yes, right.
good to see you again. It's been so long."
I wish they recognized me, but yeah.
Well, let's talk about Eephus. First of all, how did you get to be involved in it, and then tell us just about the film itself.
Sure. I mentioned earlier this newspaper called Backstage, back when I was living in New York, but Backstage is now more of a website, and it's where I go almost daily to look for acting jobs. You can, search your age range, search your area, and one day, it was August 2021, I was taking a look, and I searched my age parameter, and all of a sudden, I see this posting for looking for baseball actors for a baseball movie in my age range. And I was like, this sounds amazing, to be past retirement age in baseball, but for an opportunity to do a baseball movie.
Right, and you alluded before to not making the freshman team,
Right.
which also precluded you being in Greece.
Yes.
So you had some redemption,
Right,
like a redemption.
yes.
You were looking for a redemption story here.
So
Good.
yeah, I saw a posting in they did not have my character listed. They had a bunch of characters, but not. The only character that was suitable was a character that was in his 40s, who had an Italian last name like I do, but his description was he swears like a sailor and has a beer gut. And I was like, okay, I'm not quite the physical what they're looking for, but I'm like, I'm applying. And I wrote a cover letter. I'm like, I know I'm not what you're physically looking for, but this project sounds really amazing. And sure enough, within a day, I got contacted by one of the producers on it, and he wanted to set up a Zoom audition for me to have with the director. And they sent me 2 different characters to prepare. And sure enough, one of the characters was the character I was cast in.
So tell us about who that is.
So the Eephus is about 2 men's recreational baseball teams playing their last game before their field is going to be demolished. It takes place in the 1990s. My character, his name is Graham Morris, and he plays third base. He's kind of the player coach, but he also works for the development company that is responsible for the field getting demolished.
Oh, wow.
So you have characters on both teams that kind of have some resentment towards me at times. So the Washington Post wrote a really nice review, and they mentioned in a different type of film, my character would be seen as a villain. But in this, they said he's kind of conflicted and conscientious. And in that really, it was never like he's supposed to be a bad guy.
Right, it was never presented as that.
Right.
You never envisioned it that way. It was never presented to you that way by the director or anything like that.
Right.
That's something more nuanced, which that's what I understand about this film in general, is that it is, the whole thing is, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that the whole thing takes place during this baseball game.
Right.
And that a lot of what it seems to be, a lot of what the critics are certainly responding to, I noticed in reading reviews, is this kind of fleshing out of nuance and character and just, the fact that you stay with people long enough in this film to really kind of get a sense of who those characters are internally, as well as just, how they're playing in the game, or how, what part they play in that game.
Right, yeah. I think our director has talked a lot about it, but it's like you get little glimpses into who they are, but you're not even quite sure what a lot of them do off field, or how much they really interact with each other. There are interactions between the 2 teams where you get the sense, oh yeah, I kind of know that guy, because they call each other by first name, but it's kind of this one day a week is their thing, and that's where they, hang out with one another and, give each other a hard time, and it's it's the end of an era, and a lot of them have been doing this for like maybe 20 years, and some of them are newer, but it really is them kind of coming to grips with it, or not really coming to grips with it. And it is, just played out over the course of, one day, one game. We're in the same location. We wear the same uniform the whole game. And some of us might not have washed it at all during filming.
Right. I was going to say, not too much worry about costume changes then, that's for sure.
Nope. Yep. Everything
the wardrobe was pretty simple here.
Yep, which was amazing, wearing a baseball uniform for a month straight in October, beautiful fall-like weather. Except when we went into overnight shoots, that got a little bit more challenging.
I would imagine so, especially at that time of year where there's a big difference here in New England, as we know.
Yeah.
But the kind of you have to buy into the director's vision here, obviously. As an actor, you always have to do that, I think, in order for it to be successful. Did you kind of connect to that right away?
I can honestly say, and I have emails to prove it, and my wife can attest, but I was cast a year before we filmed, and a bunch of us were, cast in August, September 2021. We didn't film until October 2022. But meeting with some of the guys in the film and our director and the writers, I early on, it felt like it was going to be special. I wasn't predicting $100 million at the box office or going to Cannes or all these amazing reviews, but I was very confident in their talent and their experience. And once we started filming or rehearsing like a couple months before, again, it just kind of got reinforced. I'm like, yeah, this feels special.
Had you worked with any of the folks that you did on this film before, or?
There was a couple actors I was in maybe a class with, or where you kind of cross paths, but or I was like familiar with a little bit, but not. I didn't have any of their phone numbers like I do now.
Yeah, I mean the ensemble part of this, it's just so palpable.
Yeah.
That it really does trade on the success of it as a viewing experience, for instance, does trade on just that sense that you guys project as a collective of, like the sadness of the kind of elegiac quality that reviewers have also mentioned of this something ending, and how do you deal with that, and how do you do that together and as rivals but also sharers of that field for the last time. All that kind of thing seems to permeate.
Yeah, well, it's funny for me too is seeing my former high school, living around the corner from my former high school, getting torn down over the last 5 years. It actually really did kind of resonate with me a little bit more. I remember seeing a picture of the baseball field at Arlington High when it was just all construction equipment on it. And I sent it to our director. I'm like, Carson, this is where I used to play baseball, Babe Ruth baseball, and now it's construction equipment on it. Well, so I feel like I was able to kind of, tap into that, just seeing a little bit every day, or over the course of 5 years of school.
Yeah, that really is an interesting juxtaposition of watching, something similar happen in the town that you know so well.
Right, where my grandmother went, where my parents went, and thankfully Soldiers Field, where we filmed in Douglas, Mass, is staying put, so it's not getting demolished. But
that is cool, because it is clearly a self-contained field that looks. I don't know if you guys kind of aged it in some way to make it look like the 90s more or something, but it really it is nice to know that in fact that field is there.
Yeah. Well, I think I remember our director Carson Lund saying he didn't want them to take care of the grass too much once it got to September, like don't cut it too much, or but they actually did put up some old. They built up a wall, the right field wall, to block car traffic. But they also put on a ground round sign and all these old kind of signs, because it does take place in the 90s. They don't really hit you over the head with it, but it's kind of vaguely set in the 90s.
Yeah, they definitely want you, again, it's got to be consistent in the same way as I don't know if you saw the Showtime series that was on, the series called Showtime, which was about the Lakers and the Celtics in the 1980s. It ran for a couple of seasons. One of the great delights for those of us who were, consuming this spectacle at that time was all the little touches that planted you firmly in the 1980s. So a ground round sign, for instance, works really well for the 90s.
Yeah, there's even like some old boom boxes in the dugout that were clearly from like the 80s, and all the cars we drive are from like the late 70s or early 80s.
Right, these are the things that you got to get right. That. Tell us, so I want to, we're running out of time as we always do, but I wanted to ask you two last things. One is just any anecdote that springs to mind for you from the filming, from the experience that you would just like to share with folks because it's fun or whatever. And then the second thing is just a reminder of where people can find Eephus if they're interested. From this point forward. Again, we are filming this in early April of 2025, but we'll want to know.
One story I like to tell is a few weeks before we started filming, we had a practice on Soldiers Field, and before us there was a championship game for a men's recreational league going on. And once their game finished, we started rehearsing / taking batting practice / taking fielders, and I guess the men's recreational league team felt like they needed to start chirping at us and letting us know we're not that good or anything like that. And this one actor on our cast, who is by far the best athlete on our team and probably in the whole cast in general, his name is Pat Garrigan, and he stepped up to the plate to take some batting practice, and he launched this pitch. I think it hit around the 350 mark in the outfield and then bounced over the wall.
That is a serious shot.
And he rounded the bases, came back to the dugout, and he's like, I was sick of hearing those guys talk.
That is great. So, that's a very mythical baseball kind of moment, right?
Where he literally he did quiet them, and because I think those guys stopped talking and they turned around and left. And he literally, and I every so often I like to thank Pat, and I'm like, thank you for being our hero.
Yeah, there you go. That's a great story. Yeah. Works perfectly with a baseball film, also.
Right. Yes. Eephus, it's over the course of March and April 25, it's currently scheduled to open in about 178 theaters. It's already opened in a lot of cities. It's still opening in more. The film distributor's name is Music Box Films. They're based out of Chicago. If you were to go on their website, you can see a list of all their theatrical engagements. We do have at the Cabot Theater in Beverly, April 16th and 17th. It's going to be playing there, as well as the Center for Arts in Natick on April 22nd, 23rd.
So chances to see it this month if you're tuning in.
If you can't make it to the Somerville Theater or any of the, it's also playing in Cape Cod area. And
great. So I mean, really, it's all over for the moment.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, some of the theaters have kind of gone away a bit, but it's still. They have release dates up until July 1st in other states. Great. So I think they're hoping to kind of keep having it linger a bit. So
excellent.
And it's such a beautifully shot film. If you have an opportunity to see it on a big screen,
that's the place.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is great. Thank you. Really appreciate you coming by and talking about this with us.
Anytime. Thank you, James.
I've been speaking with Stephen Radochia about his film, or the film he appears in, Eephus. Again, available for you in local theaters, and I'm sure it will live a long life remotely thereafter. So congratulations to you and to the rest of the film makers and actors and crew, etc. This has been Talk of the Town. I'm James Milan. We really appreciate Stephen coming and joining us, and we appreciate you being here as well. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.
ACMi productions are only made possible with your support. Visit patreon.com/ACMi to learn how you can help.